G'day, brothers and sisters. By this stage of the gospel, if a person still has questions about the identity of Jesus and who he is, that should be settled when we read the story of Jesus calming the storm and Jesus driving out demons. Listen to what the story says. It says, one day Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." So they got out of a boat and set out. As they sailed off, he fell asleep. A tempest came over on the lake so that the boat was in danger of being swamped, and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke him up, saying, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." He got up and rebuked the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided, and all was calm. "Where is your faith?" he asked his disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the waters, and they obey him." The Sea of Galilee is around 210 meters below sea level. And with the surrounding mountains, when a storm comes, when the winds come in, they swarm in kind of like a funnel. And it's almost like the winds are coming from all sorts of directions. So the fishermen on board who were part of his disciples, they would have been used to storms. But where they were fishing on the Sea of Galilee was not the usual spot they would have been accustomed to, or most likely. So when the storm hits, they're quite fearful. They believe they're going to die. And they would have seen drownings and the like happen on the Sea of Galilee because it was notorious for these kinds of swells and these kinds of tempests. And on the boat, and it's interesting, during the 80s, archaeologists dug up a boat in the region of Galilee, which has been called the Jesus boat. And this boat was about 27 feet long. So it gives us a bit of an idea as to what boats would have been like in Jesus' day. The disciples, given that they were a small group, would have all been able to fit on this boat with Jesus. And it says when the tempest arises and the boat starts to fill up with water, Jesus is on the back sleeping. There was a small little bench kind of where the stern was, where the person who was controlling it could actually, you couldn't sleep, but you could sit down, you could maybe fold yourself over a bit and lie down on a cushion. And Jesus is here when the swell actually begins. And it says frantically, the Greek grammar of not only Luke's account, but also Matthew and Mark is quite forceful. The disciples are really agitating, fearing that they're going to die. And then it says Jesus gets up, and it describes him as basically muzzling this storm. Matthew will describe the storm as being a mega storm. Mark will say that Jesus muzzles and rebukes the storm and the winds and the waves, and they fall into line at the response or the command of their Creator. And this provokes an interesting response from the disciples. They basically start looking around saying in amazement, "Who is this man?" Having witnessed his ability to calm the winds and to calm the waves, they're crying out, "Who is this man?" And it says Jesus actually forcefully rebukes them when he says, "Where is your faith?" Jesus basically says to them, "Where is your faith? You've seen me do all of these wonderful things, and now you think you're going to die." We can kind of sympathize with the disciples, because if you were in the midst of the storm or I was on that boat, we also would have been fearful. But I love the way the gospel writers retell this story. They're basically referring or alluding to the Old Testament, in particular to the story of Jonah in Jonah chapter 1 and also Psalm 107. Look at what these words say in Psalm 107. It says, they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm, and he guided them to their desired haven. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. So in other words, the disciples in this moment are amazed as to who this Jesus is. And it's basically a picture of Psalm 107, which is talking about God calming the seas and calming the storms. And they realize in their amazement, this is more than just a prophet. This is more than just a teacher. In the Old Testament, no prophet performed a miracle like this. No prophet had the ability to calm the seas and calm the storms. Elijah prayed for rain. That was about it. Here we have Jesus demonstrating his power and his identity as God by calming the storm. He is the very same God who in Genesis 1 created. And it says that he separated the lands and he separated the seas. Here Jesus and the disciples recognize it. Here Jesus is demonstrating his incredible power. And I want to say that it's also a picture of Jonah chapter 1. Listen to what happened in Jonah chapter 1 when Jonah was thrown overboard. He says before he gets thrown over, he said, "I am a Hebrew and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." In Mark's account of this particular event, Mark draws distinctive, unmistakable parallels to Jonah's story, which you can see if you study it in the original language. So here, the disciples' amazement, their wonder, their awe as to who this man is made plain by Jonah's pronouncement. "I am a Hebrew and I worship" who? "The Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." There can be no dispute whatsoever that the earliest Christians realized Jesus calming the storm was a picture of his authority as the God who created the heavens and the earth. But in our second story, we get another glimpse as to the authority of Jesus. Let's read this particular story. It says that they sailed to the region of the Gerasenes, which is across the lake from Galilee. The region of the Gerasenes was about 50 odd kilometers, depending on which precise city this takes place in. It was about 50 kilometers southeast of the Sea of Galilee. And it says that when Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven back by the demons into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And he begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. So as the situation plays out, Jesus enters a predominantly Gentile region. There were only a few Jews who lived in this region, as we can tell by the fact that they had pigs there. And tombs, where dead bodies were kept, just like today, how during Halloween and times people try to associate grave sites with the dead and with evil spirits and demonic ghosts and ghouls and stuff. That was the same in the ancient world. People associated tombs and graves with dead bodies. And the only time you typically went there was to bury somebody or was to perform funerary rites. Otherwise, you tended to stick clear of it. Only a very, very select few pagans, Gentiles, who practiced divination and necromancy and tried to evoke the spirits of dead people would actually go to tombs. And sometimes they would even camp out overnight in order to perform their pagan rituals. But this was a very select few. So Jesus encounters a demon-possessed man. Now it says when Jesus asks him his name, he says that his name is Legion. A Roman legion had between 5,000 and 6,000 troops. It was the largest military unit. So basically, this is a way of saying that this man had many, many demons. Exactly how many we don't know. That name Legion was probably just like a nickname to refer to the amount of demons, the sheer number he has. But regardless, Jesus interestingly asked the man his name. This is quite interesting. No prophet in the Old Testament practiced an exorcism. So this, like with the calming of the storm, demonstrates Jesus' authority over the supernatural forces. He has power not only over the supernatural forces of light, but also the supernatural forces and the spiritual realm of darkness, because even the demons know who he is. But in the ancient world, there were few people who did try to practice exorcisms. And the way they believed you had to do it was through all kinds of crazy sorcery. They believed you had to drink potions, or they believed that you had to smell smelling salts and all of these smelling roots and all of these sorts of crazy things. But some people believed the way to get rid of a demon was to evoke the name of a higher demon. So when Jesus asked him his name Legion, he's going to demonstrate that only in his name and under his authority is there real power to drive out demons. And this is why the Gospels in other places will go to great lengths to point out that there were times when Jesus didn't even let the demons speak. Why? He didn't need to ask them their name. He didn't need to invoke the spirit of a higher person in order or a higher being. He could do it because he is the supreme being. So this is a powerful story about the authority and the command and the power of Jesus. It's an amazing story. And it says then that as the story unfolds, it says that the demons beg him, Son of the Most High God, don't torture us before our appointed time. It's interesting, only twice in Luke's Gospel is Jesus ever referred to as the Son of the Most High God. One is here by Legion, and the other is by the angel Gabriel. This demonstrates that the spiritual realm knows who Jesus is. And these demons are fearful, they're trembling. They had the notion that God was going to judge them one day. And it says that they believe he's going to torture them before their appointed time. So the demon asks Jesus to send them into a nearby herd of pigs. And then it's interesting, as the story goes on, Jesus permits them, but the pigs jump off over a cliff into the abyss. This is beautiful. This is amazing. They beg Jesus not to cast them into the abyss, and then yet they jump off into the ocean. And the ocean, in the metaphor and in the poetry of the Old Testament and in the psyche of people in that day and age, was regarded as the abyss, the place where demons dwelt. The abyss is not the same place as hell. We'll get to that in Revelation. But the abyss was the place or the abode of the demonic forces of darkness. So here we have Jesus sending and casting the demons away. And one day the Bible says he's going to cast all of them permanently into the lake of fire. But this demonstrates something amazing about the identity of this Son of the Most High God. He has the ability to calm the very nature which he created. And he has authority over even the realm of darkness. Even they have to submit to his authority. All powers, the Bible says, have to submit to Jesus' authority. So like I said, brothers and sisters, these two passages should leave the reader in no doubt as to who Jesus is and where his authority and absolute power comes from. He is God in the flesh. God bless you, brothers and sisters. There's a lot more we could say, but God bless you. Let's go into a time of prayer and we'll see you next time.